Teaching While Queer is a podcast for 2S LGBTQ plus educational professionals to share their experiences in academia. Hi, I'm your host, Brian Stanton, a theater pedagogue and educator in New York City, and my goal is to share stories from around the world from 2S LGBTQ plus educators. I hope you enjoy Teaching While Queer. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Teaching While Queer. We are almost to the end of our season 2, and I am so excited to have with me today Elisa Greb. How are you doing, Elisa?
I am awesome, Brian. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for asking. Do you mind telling us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So my name is Elisa Greb, and I am a middle school English teacher. I started teaching in 2006, and I don't know. I don't know what else to say about that other than I'm really excited to be here because I spent the first 10 years or so of my career doing everything possible to not let my students know that I was queer. And this is just a really refreshing experience for me to be able to not only engage with your former guests, like, you know, watching videos and listening to what they had to say, but to just be able to create this connection with people in a way that, like, for a long time, I was not able to make. So thank you.
Oh my gosh. Thank you. I mean, you just described what my goal is, and this will be announced in social media by the time this episode airs, so I feel very comfortable saying it. But we are forming a board of directors to become a nonprofit that actually will support queer educator communities
Oh, wow.
locally, nationally, kind of worldwide, providing resources for educators, specifically for educators, as opposed to doing kind of like paralleled work to Glesson, which does a lot of work for students.
Yes.
This would be work specifically for the educators to make sure that you know that you're not alone in this and that there are people here that can support you. So I'm really happy to hear that from you, because it just means that what I set out to do 2 years ago is impactful, even
Yes.
in small ways for individual people. And I appreciate that so much. So thank
Yeah.
you for sharing.
Absolutely.
So you spent 10 years not telling students, not telling community who you were. What was it like for you growing up? Did you already have a sense of self, or did it come later on in life?
Oh, yeah. I comparatively speaking, I guess, I woke up, I shot up in bed. I was 14 years old. I was trying to fall asleep, and I remember just going, oh no, I'm gay. Like, it was like this, like, it just washed over me. And I've never been the kind of person to not say something true. And I just, from then on, I never denied it. I told everybody, and I was very loud and proud as a teenager, but I was also very lonely because it was the 90s and I was the only one. And I went to school. I grew up in a small town, not like, I didn't have a ton of issues with, bullying. Certainly there were kids who said things to me in the hallway and that sort of thing, but it wasn't so much the bullying as it was the loneliness, for me, because I had friends and I talked to my friends, but I was never able to truly connect in that way with my peers. Now, of course, since then, a slew of them have come out, but at the time, I was the only one willing to talk about it. So, yeah, that was hard. It was isolating.
Yeah, this is a participation section of the show, folks. If you grew up in the 90s and you were the only one willing to talk about it for a while, like, when I was in high school, by my senior year, there were a few other people. Certainly my freshman year, there was one other person before his mother ripped us apart from each other. But like, if you were the only person, raise your hand if you were the only person in your school who was willing to talk about it. It's lonely. It really is. Because, I mean, you can have your friends and you can talk about it with your friends, but there's nothing like the connection of talking about it with someone who has a similar experience and knows somewhat what you're going through.
Yes.
And so how does that inform your work with students now? You've been teaching, you kind of denied it for 10 years. What was it like to kind of backtrack from being out and proud to, oh gosh, I gotta simmer down on this?
Yeah, right. It happened so suddenly and so naturally because it was almost like, I don't know, it's just panic, you know, it was in the mid 2000s. And, you know, I would say that we at that point hadn't really come very far from the 90s. It was sort of similar. And I just didn't have I didn't have the confidence in myself yet as a teacher to not be afraid that it would somehow put into question my ability to teach my students. So, and it was like, you know, then it just kind of snowballed. Like I never talked about it. So then I never talked about it. And, you know, I played the pronoun game when kids would ask me questions and I deflected and I changed the subject and I don't know. I'm sure it's fascinating because it's such a unique experience to those of us who have been through it. And it's so hard to put into words because I mean, I was very honest with my colleagues, with my coworkers. Everybody was fine and, you know, it was totally normal. And somehow they all respected me and didn't say anything to students either. And it was just, I don't know. And it ate away at me because of the queer kids that I had. And I felt so guilty not being able to talk about it. But at the same time, I was too afraid that somebody's parents were going to make an issue of it. And I mean, I lost sleep over it. I did. And it really wasn't until, right before COVID was when I kind of really started talking openly about it. And then I'm not sure if anybody has brought this up with you, but then during COVID, teaching online, being in everybody's living rooms, I stopped talking about it again because I thought that if their families are sitting right there, do you know what I mean? And it's not that I never get up in front of a classroom like, hello, I'm a lesbian. You know, I don't do that, but it's, you know, just a casual mention of my wife or whatever. I just like that. It's just been a roller coaster. It's been a roller coaster.
Hi, I'm Chris Nessie from the House of EdTech podcast, a part of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to right now. Shows on the network are individually owned and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
There's a couple of things that you brought up that I think are important to kind of dissect. The first is how natural it can be to have to protect yourself. And what really drives me crazy about that, what I think is so wild, is that this is a cishet privilege problem. Because a person who is cisgender and heterosexual never has to worry about whether or not their relationship with another adult is going to make people question whether or not you are capable of doing your job.
Mm-hmm.
of which you are an expert with a degree, and not just a degree, additional training on how to do the job specific things.
Yeah. Yeah. You're
And
right.
yeah, I think that there's so many people that like need to sit with that for a moment and really think about like privilege when it comes to these things, because like you said, we're not walking in being like, okay, I'm queer and here's how you can be too. It's
Right.
like, this is my husband and my kids.
Right.
This is my wife,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or I went to dinner with my wife. It's a single word that is so natural to say for so many people, but becomes an issue when it's not a cishet relationship.
Yep.
And so, yeah, for those of you who are allies, take a moment to think about that. Like, when was the last time you had to censor yourself because of the fact that you couldn't talk about your relationship because it would call into question whether or not you were capable of doing your job?
Yeah.
Wild. It's wild.
Mm-hmm.
So I appreciate you sharing that. And I want to talk a little bit now then, like, you started talking about with your students, you kind of backed off in COVID, and I totally get that. You are in everybody's living room. You don't know who's home. You don't know what their family is like. And that, I feel like that experience is actually what's led into the micromanaging that's happening with school boards and parenting right now.
Oh, yeah.
Is that they're like, oh, we were in the classroom when
Mm-hmm.
they were at home, and so we know what was happening, but they don't, because
Right.
we didn't know what was happening. Like,
Yeah,
we were
exactly.
we were told to do a job and we just did it. Like,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
we're still figuring it out.
Right.
But I think that's kind of like trickled into things. So coming out of COVID, have you been able to open up with your students a little bit
Mm-hmm.
more?
Yes, very much. And it was almost like, so I didn't talk to them, and then I did a little bit, and then COVID made me stop. And then I was just kind of angry, like at myself and angry with the world. Like why should I have to hide who I am? It was like, cause I got that little taste before. So then when we came back, so my ultimate goal over the past few years has just been to normalize it. I don't shout it from the rooftops, but I have pictures of my wife and 2 kids behind my desk. Whereas before I would have put the kids and not my wife. But yeah, right.
I did
you
the
get
same
that.
thing. I did the same thing. Yes.
Yes.
And it's
Yes.
wild because my kids went to school with my students. Like,
Oh, wow.
when I first started, I had a principal who was like, "You can't talk about things."
Uh-huh.
And like, I was like, "No, I have to talk about things. My kids go here. Like, that's stupid." and then I realized when the next like meet the parent night came up, like, I completely omitted my family. I showed my kids because I have plenty of pictures of them together, but I didn't show a full family picture. And so
Yeah.
it's those little things that like dig in the back of your brain, and then all of a sudden they're showing up in the world, and you're like, damn it, like, I'm so
Yes.
mad about this.
Yes. Yes, exactly. And that's a very different experience from mine though, because where I teach is like 45 minutes away from where my kids go to school. And
Oh,
like,
wow.
I commend you for that, because I would never want to live and teach in the same place, because I want to go to the grocery store and not know anybody. But, I can totally understand that. And I think about, it's true. A lot of teachers, when they introduce themselves at, open house or meet the teacher night or whatever, they might put a picture of their families up on their smart boards. And even now to this day, I don't think I could go that far. I am more comfortable. The kids are a lot more go with the flow, accepting. It's the parents that I've always been afraid of.
Yep.
They are truly the ones.
It's never the kids.
It's never
honestly.
the kids. It's never the kids. And I'm sure you've had a similar experience that now I'm almost like, why did I wait so long? Because they don't even blink. It's not even a thing to them. You know, it's like, oh yeah, you have a wife, blah, blah, moving on. You know, it's
Yep.
like not a serious thing to them. And I guess, I don't know, again, there's like this anger inside of me, this like retrospective anger, like why did I wait so long? What was I so afraid of? But I mean, obviously a lot of things.
Absolutely. And it's not like society helped at all, because
No.
it definitely did not. I mean, especially in the early 2000s, like, I don't blame you for those first 10 years,
Yeah.
because I feel like I had teachers in high school that I think back on now who were probably trying to tell me
Mhm.
that we were similar,
Mhm.
but couldn't say it. And it was
Mhm.
literally, you couldn't say it. And it was, I mean, when you think about queer advancement and whatnot, I mean, gay male sex, like sodomy, wasn't legalized until 2003.
That's
Like,
insane.
it's not
Yeah.
right. It's like you don't know. Well, one, you don't know, as a young person you might be breaking some laws, and two,
Right.
and
Just for
two, like,
existing.
yeah, just for existing, right? And you know, doing things that come naturally to people.
Mhm.
um but then two, it's like, in the scheme of things, it's only been a short amount of time. And I try to remind people of that, because it's funny now, listening to, especially to my kids, like my daughter's 9, and sometimes she does this to be funny, but she calls it the olden days and the 1900s,
Oh yeah.
and right, all that stuff. And I have to, we were talking the other day just about, we were at a diner and there were pictures of like Marilyn Monroe and Elvis Presley and whatnot. And so, to give her a perspective on time, I said, okay, well, Marilyn Monroe died before your grandma was born. So, like, even your grandma wasn't alive at the same time. But
Mhm.
on, Dad Kevin's side, grandpa was 12.
Uh-huh.
So you can ask grandpa and he might have a memory
Right.
of seeing something with Marilyn Monroe in it, but you can't ask, Nana, because she's not going to know.
Mhm.
Um, and so I try to use our personal timelines to be like an anchor for her.
Right. Sure.
And that stuff is what gets me when it comes to like the queer liberation movement, is that 1969, my parents were 5. I was 15 years from being born.
Mhm.
Like, it's not that long ago.
Right. Right.
When you think about, like, I'm gonna be 40. Like, it's not that
Yes.
long ago.
Yes.
And people are like, oh, it's been so long, and look at all the progress you made. And I'm like, yeah, but look at that progress is actually compounded to like
Mhm.
2003 until
Yes.
2012, and
Mhm.
then kind of went backwards in
Mhm.
2016, and
Mhm.
now we're
Right.
seeing a little bit more. I mean, the other day, kudos to President Biden for updating Title IX.
Yes.
Hopefully, that will be enforceable. I see it being an appeals thing to the Supreme Court,
Mm.
but hopefully, it will be enforceable and the students will finally get protections. But it's disheartening that it really is like these monumental moments that have to happen. A Supreme Court case
Right.
made it okay for us to exist.
Right.
Well, why do those things have to happen? Why does it have to take something so big? And why
Right.
can't people realize that marriage equality passed in 2013?
Mhm.
It's been 11 years. Not even, because it's not June yet.
Mhm.
Um, so it's interesting to me, especially because I'm a history buff. So I really try to relate things back to the timeline. And, well, as a millennial, we've lived through a lot of historical things.
We
I
have. We
I
have.
was joking the other day with my husband about like having lived through so many of the end of the world
Mhm.
um, experiences, because we saw this random countdown clock in New York City when we were at a farmer's market, and I was like, what is counting down? The end of the world? Like, we've already
Right.
lived through that 6 times.
It's true.
So I mean, Mayan calendars, Y2K, like so many
Y2K. Yeah. Yep.
things. So many things.
Yes. It's so
Yeah.
true. It's true. And the amount of progress that happened, and my wife and I, we talk about this all the time, how we feel so lucky to have been born into this time period. I
Yes.
mean, and for our kids, they don't even understand, the fact that we weren't legally married when we had our first son because we couldn't be. And, we got married when I was pregnant with our second son because we could be. And to them, having that conversation for the first time, they were kind of like, what? What do you mean you weren't married? And then we had to explain it because to them, we're just normal. And it's just interesting that kids now, it is being normalized. Not to say that it's common, but it's
Right.
not, it's not something that's a head turner so much anymore.
One thing that's really frustrating to me that is still so common, especially in southern states, is that trans parents and lesbian parents have to adopt a child that their partner gives birth to.
Yes.
Because even if they're legally married in some states, you have to adopt the child because you weren't a part of the process. And I find that so ridiculous because I mean, I'll just quote where I'm from. I'm from California. The mom writes down a name on the birth certificate of who the other parent is.
Right.
That's it. Like the mom writes down a name.
Yeah.
Nobody else gets involved in the process.
Right.
And so it's really interesting to me where it's like, oh, because you're a trans person or because you're a lesbian couple and you had you had a baby. And for some reason, and I'm sure there's legalities with the surrogacy process. I'm sure that lawyers are involved that kind of deal with the birth certificate side of things. But I don't know if it's treated the exact same way where you have to go and then adopt the baby later. I think that through the surrogacy process at the beginning, through all that contracting, the baby is yours.
Right.
And both parents are listed. That's something I might have to research. I might ask the Broadway husbands. So if anybody follows them on Instagram or TikTok, they're pretty fantastic. But I'll ask them because they have gone through surrogacy and I'm intrigued. I want to know because I'm so frustrated by the fact that people are still my best friend is a lesbian. She had to adopt both of her children because her wife was the one that was pregnant. Right.
And it's just, it sounds so ridiculous to say it out loud. It doesn't make sense, but it is. That's the reality. Yes.
Yeah. My old neighbor before I moved to New York, he and his ex-wife had, he's 1.5 now, but he didn't get to adopt the baby, fully adopt the baby until he was a year old. This child is his. He's been raising this child, but because he's a trans man, he wasn't able to adopt the baby until the baby was a full year old. And it's well, he's dad. That's just all there is to it. I don't know why the paperwork has to be so hard.
Right. Yep. And those are the kinds of hoops that I feel like we might always have to be jumping through. I'm sorry to say, but at the same time, it sounds weird to say, but I'm thankful to be able to jump through those hoops. That there's not that my wife and I are able to have this family, even though,
there are hoops to be jumped over.
Yes.
Jumped through. Yes.
Right.
Absolutely. I agree with that 100%. Because I think that it's important to recognize that at the moment we are free to have our families.
Yes.
And, I'm being cautiously cynic when I say that.
I get that.
But I think that there's a reality to we've had rights, or rather we didn't have rights. Now we have them and people are threatening to take them away.
Right.
So there's some, cautious cynicism there.
Yes.
But let's not focus on the negative. Let's talk about how great it is for you now working with queer students. What is that experience like now that you get to kind of have a little bit of camaraderie with them?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because even when I was silent, I was still always the teacher that they came out to. And was it a vibe? Was it just this other wavelength? I don't know.
It's just gaydar.
It's yeah. I'm serious. I think it is like that is a real thing. I do believe. But no, now it's interesting because there is a camaraderie and there is, I have some who want to come to me during homeroom and they want to like gossip and they want to, talk to me, in a really familiar way, which I'm absolutely fine with because I'm happy to be that adult for them.
Mm.
But it's interesting because, it has become, I want to say, I keep using the word normalized. Okay. But it's become more normalized to the point that they talk about themselves more with each other. And for some of them, I'm old news. Like it's not even, they're not going to come to me in the way that they used to because they're already so comfortable with themselves that they don't need me. And I think that's a beautiful thing. I'm seeing that more and more and more. So, something must be going right, in the undercurrent of society that kids are more and more willing to be open about themselves. And I think that's a beautiful thing.
Absolutely. That's one of the things that I loved about teaching high school was just seeing how many students were comfortable with themselves. And I moved from one school district to another. And when I got to that other school district, what was really relieving for me was the idea that they didn't need an adult to be the person holding the banner for them. They were holding the banner themselves.
Yes.
And I was there to be a support if they needed it,
Mm-hmm.
which they didn't really.
Mm-hmm.
And so I love that because it's not that way for all people everywhere, but I think that there is definitely some movement going on because, as we mentioned, the kids aren't really the issue here. It's the adults.
It is. But the kids are quickly becoming the adults. So
That's true.
I think that's where my hope lies.
Yep, absolutely. Especially when there are some numbers that, that there is like 40% of Gen Z or something like that identifies as part of the LGBTQ plus community somewhere on the spectrum.
Yeah,
or
it's
at
a high
least
number.
Open to the idea. It's very high. So what happens when those folks have kids, and how are we going to see gender and sexuality be presented completely different when parents are talking about it from the get-go?
Right.
And there's more queer parent representation. And, you're not the only one in the school. That's how I felt. I knew one lesbian couple and myself at my daughter's former elementary school, as far as parents go.
Right.
And so we were the two. But in fact, I take that back. There was two lesbian couples and ourselves. And then a teacher that I knew who had a kid there, but co-parented with a woman. So it was a different kind of dynamic. But I'm looking forward to there being a more, I don't know, reflective mix of what's actually happening in society within school communities, where we're seeing 15-20% of parents are a part of the queer community. That's not to say that all queer people want to have kids, and I totally get it if you don't.
Oh yeah.
There are some days where I'm like, what did I do? And then I go, but I love you so much. It's just it's a frustrating comment. It's one of those things where I'm like, oh, and then I get over it immediately.
Right.
But I get it. But there's so many more of us who are kind of coming in to, I guess normalize is going to have to be the word of the episode.
Yeah.
Because it really feels that way. I mean, I meet parents a lot more now, queer parents.
Yes.
And the wild part is sometimes I'm meeting like older gay men who have adult children my age who co-parented them, but like nobody really knew what was going on except for the children. And that to me is wild
That's
thinking about like
fascinating.
going my whole life and maybe just talking about my dad, but not like really referencing which dad it was, like being
Yeah.
vague about it because you
Wow.
weren't allowed to talk about it.
Ugh.
So there's a whole thing. We need like a docu-series on queer history and queer parenting
Mm-hmm.
history. So
Mm-hmm.
Netflix, Hulu, get on that.
Right. Get on that.
Absolutely. So since you've been more kind of vocal with students, have you had to deal with any kind of anti-queer behavior, either from students or parents?
Not to my face. I can tell you that. I have heard there have been concerned students who have come to me and said, so and so said this about you, or so and so said that about you, and the age that I teach, middle school, they're just still regurgitating the things that they hear at home. So, they respect me enough to never say any of it to me. And I can't hold their household beliefs against them because,
No.
whatever. But I honestly, to me, just reminds me of my responsibility of being a kind, successful, um, just a normal, here we go, person that they're seeing, they're getting this crap at home, but then they're seeing that I am a full human who is coming to work every day and smiling at them and talking to them. And hopefully I'm, changing a little bit of that brain chemistry.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes just seeing someone who is successful at something you're being told cannot be successful is enough evidence to make
Yeah.
little things change in how somebody thinks.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. Definitely. And I don't know. I think it's less and less that I'm hearing also them making homophobic or transphobic comments to each other as well.
Let's talk a little bit about school community. You work at a middle school, and I have so much respect for you because I thought I could do that, and then I observed middle school and was like, no, thank you.
Yeah.
But what do you think the school community can do to be more inclusive of LGBTQIA plus people?
hmm I think, and I try to talk to my colleagues about things like watching their language, um, just in the ways that they refer to students' families, the ways that they refer to the students themselves, and being careful about categorizing, just, heteronormativity, and also like being careful with gender norms and things like that. Obviously I can't police what other teachers do in their classrooms, but I at least I try to bring up the conversations in spaces where people can hear me. I don't know. So there are some other teachers in my building who, have consider themselves to be allies and go out of their way to put up like safe space stickers and things like that. And I have always felt like that would put a target on me to have something really visual like that. So I don't know. I go about my days being just quietly dedicated to normalizing. I'm so sorry. I keep bringing up that same word, but
I feel like for the fun of it and the play on word, we should go with like homogenizing
okay.
because of just that prefix homo.
Yeah,
The
I
fun
love
play
it
on
so
words.
much. That, and it took me a second to hear it, but you're like so right. Yes, yes. But I mean, like, because I'm not gonna hang a pride flag in my classroom. Okay? I'm not gonna put that I'm not going to give that opportunity to a student who's going to take a picture and send it to their parents and then, they make a huge deal about it. I forever am going to be trying not to make it an issue for myself. And I think but at the same time, the quietness of it, I think, is also, it's on purpose. It's a choice because I don't want kids to feel like I'm being in their faces and trying to shove it down their throats. I just want them to see that I am just a regular person, just like you. And I accomplished that, I think, with my colleagues a long time ago. And I don't know, to get back to your question, I'm not doing anything in terms of like policy. I'm not doing anything in terms of like leading a club or, I'm just existing.
I think just existing is enough. And I think this is a great segue into my next question, which is, what advice would you give to a first-time teacher who's unsure about whether or not they should be authentic in the classroom?
Mm-hmm.
And I think what you just said is a great lead-in to that. I also get the visual of like water and mountains. Like, it doesn't take a waterfall to kind of do damage to a mountain. It takes a consistent drip.
Mm-hmm.
And a drip is quiet. It
Yes.
is just steady. And
Yes.
as long as you are there steady,
Mm-hmm.
you're making movement and you're making progress.
Mm-hmm.
But let's let you dive into that question. What advice
Mm-hmm.
would you give?
This is a hard question for me because a lot of new teachers are from a very different generation from me. I am an elder millennial, and I have been through a time period that a lot of young teachers have never had to go through. And I honestly think that even if I would try to give them advice about something like this, they'd be like, okay, shut up, old lady. Like I'm going to do what I want to do. But it's very different in different areas. I know that, particularly in southern states, that there can be a lot more fear about pushback, and I get that. And I don't live in the South. I'm in Pennsylvania, so things are mixed. But I'm close enough to a city that it's not so much an issue for me. But I think I would just give advice the same way that I would say to anybody, that kids, no matter who you are, your students are going to know immediately if you are being inauthentic. And I don't care if that's lying about who your favorite singer is, or pretending that you don't like a certain kind of food when you love it. Like, they're gonna sniff it out, and they're not going to engage with you as well as they could. But that does not mean, that means different things for different people. So like I said, if you're the kind of person who wants to put up the pride flag and you want to, talk about your significant other day in and day out with your kids, then that's your choice. But I also don't think that that's necessary. I think that you can just be yourself and look around at your gajillion straight colleagues who are, you know, you don't have to overcompensate, you know, and it's okay to need and want to protect yourself. And that doesn't make you a bad teacher. It doesn't make you a bad queer person. But I don't know. Again, different areas, different experiences that for some people they might not ever want to talk about it with their students because a variety of reasons. But authenticity is always going to be your in with your kids. And that goes for anything. So I don't know if I answered the question. It's hard for me to say because it's just dependent on who the recipient of the advice would be.
Yeah, I totally get that. And I will say that you're not the first person to kind of go along that lines. There are people that don't feel the need to talk about it, and that is perfectly okay because this is an individual thing. That's why I get so frustrated when like celebrities are outed. I'm like, how dare you? People
Right.
should be allowed to talk about this when they want to talk about this. It's their own personal experience, and it is a portion of who you are. It's
Yes.
not the entirety of who you are. So show up for your students in what way you feel best to show up. And you're absolutely correct in that.
Yeah.
So at this point, I'm going to actually turn the mic over to you, and you get to ask me a question for me to answer. So take it away.
Okay. So I'm going to sort of flip it back to you and ask you, is there anything over your career that you look back on that you wish you would have done differently?
Yes. So the first thing that I would have done differently is made sure that I was proactively engaging my family in things. Like I said, I kind of forgot to put them into a presentation. Everybody knew, and many of my students knew my kids. Like everybody knew. It wasn't an issue, really. There was like a handful of people where it was an issue when I started. 4 years of a certain president kind of changed that. But I would have made sure my husband was visible in my classroom space, a picture of him somewhere. And at my old school, like I had a rolling desk or whatnot. So it would have had to been on the wall. And I need to be okay with that. And it could have just been a picture of all of us, the two of us with the kids. And I needed to be able to have him be more present because that is a part of who I am. And I walked into other people's classrooms and I saw wedding photos, the first pictures of their babies, all of these things that I didn't have. So I would have definitely made sure that those kind of things were happening up front. And then I would also not assume that all the queer people need or want my help. Because the community that I was in, I was like tokenized to be the person who was going to support queer students, but some of those queer kids didn't want or need my help. And so we actually butted more heads than we were helping each other because I was trying to provide assistance and they were like, leave me alone. And so I think that's something that is good to hear, that like, just like in life, like one, not everybody's going to like you. So it's okay for you not to like everybody. Two, not everybody needs your help just because you're the queer person, even if they're queer. So it's okay to take a step back and be like, I don't have to do that.
Right. Well, and it's like you said earlier too, it's just a small part of who you are. You know, it's not your whole personality. So it's not like every queer person needs to be friends with each other. Like it's, you know, we're all like layered onions of human beings, and there's no reason to assume. And you're right. And that's really interesting. It's really interesting.
Yep. I think back on some of those students and I'm just like, I didn't do well by you. I didn't do bad. I didn't like hurt them or cause them trauma. But like, I was being so proactive that it maybe made them more passive in how they wanted to communicate and express themselves.
Sure.
Because I was like, I'm ready with the resources. I'm here to help you. I don't know. Jump right in, and you are safe. You are safe here, and let's talk about this, and that. But that's a little overwhelming,
right? Absolutely. Yes.
So before we wrap up this interview, I understand that you have written a novel. Do you mind telling us about it?
Yes, I would love to. So, I wrote a novel. It's called, here, I can show you real quick. It's called
Ooh.
Actually Invisible. And this story came out of my experience as I want to say closeted, but not fully, closeted at work teacher. And in the story, the main character, Josie, is accused of influencing a student to be gay. And it essentially started as like a therapeutic exercise for me to work out one of my worst fears. And, the students' parents take their concerns to the school board, and Josie gets anonymous threats through email, and it's there are flashbacks also to her past as a high school student in the 90s, as the only queer person. So some of the things that I pulled out, like obviously you write what you know, were based on some sort of like little autobiographical details, but the modern timeline of events with her being accused has never actually happened to me. I was just kind of, I've always been worried that that's something that could happen. So anyway, it's been absolutely amazing to interact with people who are reading the story who have been through something similar. And I'm talking not just teachers, but I had someone reach out to me who is a youth pastor, working with students and, also being queer and not sure how she should bring that to her job. I've had it's just been, I think, a lot of us in our age group in particular, where we have lived through like this whole weird time where it was like, the pressures to be something that we weren't. And then all of a sudden it was like, oh, maybe I can talk about this. And then now it's kind of like, should I? And then, it's, I think, a really important story. And no other novel has ever been published like this with this kind of perspective. And for various reasons, but I don't think that a lot of people would be willing to put themselves out there. And I can't tell you that I haven't lost sleep over making myself this visible. And, even talking to you today, like it's exciting, it's exhilarating, but there's always going to be in the back of my mind, like, why are you letting yourself be so visible? Why are you doing this? Is it worth it? Is somebody going to have something to say to you? But that's why I wrote this book, and that's why I published it. So, I don't know. You check it out.
I'm happy to. And also, I mean, that's why Teaching While Queer exists, is because there wasn't this voice.
Right.
So I appreciate that you've created this in a book space. I have a personal question then. Is there an audiobook?
So there is
and
not
if there's
yet.
Not, like, yeah, when's that coming out? Because
yeah.
that is my jam.
Me too. I am all about the audiobooks, especially on Libby, but, it is in the works. I will tell you that. The book is available, paperback, hardback, ebook on Amazon. Paperback and hardback also available through like other websites, Barnes and Noble and Bookshop and all that stuff. But I am going to be, I don't want to say the word submitting, but that might be it, to like the library systems this summer when I actually have time to
Yes.
finish
That's what
the
summer's for.
audiobook. Yes, exactly. So the audiobook is in the works and I totally understand. And I can let you personally know when it's available.
I love that.
Yes.
I will announce it because I'm a huge audiobook person.
Yes.
Awesome. I hope that people go out and read your book. And for those of you who are audio people like me, I will post it as soon as I find out that it is available on audiobook, because that is my thing. I just retain more information that I listen to. It's
I
how
get it.
my brain functions.
Yeah.
Hey, Elisa, thank you so much for taking time to come and talk to me today and sharing your experiences, which were very real and just, I don't know, I have a lot of camaraderie with them, probably because we're in a similar age group and kind of experience things in a similar way. So I hope that these stories helped others as well, especially the like, show up how you need to show up. You know what I mean?
Right. Yes. No, thank you. This is incredible. I mean, we talked about this already, the loneliness of being the only one. You know, it's to find community in a way like this is just, it's like a cool drink of water, you know? It's just something that you like, it's like almost like I didn't know I needed it, you know?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I really appreciate it. Thank you.
I appreciate you, and I appreciate all of you who are listening. We are so close to wrapping up season 2, and I appreciate that you've been on this journey with me. I'm so excited for our summer school sessions, which, if you haven't heard from our Instagram account, we are doing special topic sessions with panel discussions during the summer, where it's less about individual personal narratives and more about like, what are some tangible things that we can send you away with that are going to help you in different aspects of being a queer educator. So I hope you stick around for summer school, and I thank you all for listening to this episode. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Teaching While Queer. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to subscribe wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Leave a review, and that would help out tremendously. You can also support the podcast by going to www.teachingwhilequeer.com and hit support the show. Thanks so much, and have a great day. Ladies and gentlemen, that is a wrap for Season 2 of Teaching While Queer. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey, and stay tuned for our summer school session, which will be panel discussions on various topics related to the field. Have a great day.